In the beginning, in the mind of God, from all eternity, there was the idea of a cat. Then on the sixth day of creation, according to chapter 1 of Genesis, God said, "Let there be the cat." And there was the cat. And God saw that it was good. So in chapter 2, God put the cat into the garden under the care of Adam. Adam looked at the cat admiringly, and the cat declared, "You are sitting in my chair." If that cat was a cat, that cat said that. And Adam would have done better had he listened to the cat. The partnership between people and cats seems to go back to the beginnings of agriculture. Hunting societies had partnered with canines, but farming societies teamed up with cats. Stalks of grain were vulnerable to vermin. The cats very efficiently hunted those pests and became guardians of our grain supplies. Cats protected the human food chain, and people enhanced the cat food chain. It has been a great relationship as long as we are clear about who sits in the driver's seat. One of the most important grain-growing regions of the world is located in Egypt. The Nile Delta was, and is, a major breadbasket in those times and in ours. Most historians used to say that cats were domesticated in Egypt. I still say so. Okay, so they found a presumably domesticated cat on the island of Cyprus many millennia before. But Cyprus is not grain country, the way Egypt is. The Cypriot cat was related to the African wildcat and was not an ancestor of our domestic cat, which is traced back to Egypt. The word for cat in ancient Egyptian was miu. Does that sound familiar? Yes, that is also the word for cat in Chinese, not because the Chinese were talking to the Egyptians, but because the Chinese were listening to the cats and the Egyptians were listening to the cats and recorded as a name the language of the cats, which in those days was pretty much the same as the language of cats today. The Egyptians were so beloved of their cats that when their pet died, they would mummify the cat. And we know the name of one particular pet who lived about 1360 years before Christ. And that cat's name was Ta-Miu. Ta being the word in Egyptian for female, and Miu being the word for cat. So it was a rather generic name for this pet, Ta-Miu, the female cat. And she was the pet of the crown prince of Egypt, whose name was Tutmosis. He doesn't have a numeral after his name because he didn't live to take the throne, although he was the firstborn son. And here he is depicted making bread out of the wheat, which his pet had helped to protect. You see the symbiotic relationship between human society and cat society. Prince Tutmosis petted Ta-Miu and cuddled Ta-Miu, and so did his mother, Queen Tiye, and so did his younger brother, Akhenaten, whose original name was Amenophis, like their father, but who changed his name after he became ruler to Akhenaten. All these people petted Ta-Miu. There is a remote possibility that Joseph, the son of Jacob, who came down into Egypt and became manager of the royal stores of grain, touched this cat. He was in charge of the cats of Egypt, because as guardians of the grain, they were part of the administration of grain in the nation of Egypt. There was a cat goddess by the name of Bes or Bast or Bastet in the full form, who had the body of a slender woman but the head of a cat. The pharaohs of Egypt erected sphinxes with their own heads on the top, but with the reclining body of a cat. Probably not a domestic cat, but a large cat. There was a female pharaoh by the name of Hatshepsut, who depicted herself as a male lion in her sphinx, with a human head, her own head, but with a false beard attached. You see, the Egyptians in ancient times didn't have facial hair, but certain peoples had come down from the Middle East with facial hair and had ruled them for a while, so it became a symbol of authority to have a beard. Since the men couldn't grow beards of their own, they wore fake beards as a symbol of authority. And when she became pharaoh, she just wore a fake beard too. So Hatshepsut was the bearded lady who ruled Egypt. Now, I have a personal story having to do with Hatshepsut and her sphinx, which rested in East Berlin between the Second World War and the fall of communism. The Egyptian Museum of Berlin just happened to fall on the eastern side of the city in the Russian administrated zone, and thus in the DDR, the Deutsches Demokratisches Republik, the German Democratic Republic, as they called East Germany officially. And in 1981, when I visited Europe for the first time, when I went on my first grand tour of Europe, I was determined to go behind the Iron Curtain in order to see the Sphinx of Hatshepsut, among a couple of other things. There were 3 ways to get from West Berlin to East Berlin. I chose to take the U-Bahn because I wanted to see the wall. If I had taken the subway or walked through, I wouldn't have had much of a view. So I got an elevated view of the Berlin Wall by riding the U-Bahn into East Berlin. When I got to the Ägyptisches Museum, the Egyptian Museum, I found that half the museum was roped off each day, but they went back and forth. They roped off one half one day, the other half the next day. Thus, it would take 2 days to see the whole museum, and it was my luck that Hatshepsut was roped off that day. Well, I went under the rope, and so I approached Hatshepsut and walked all the way around her to see how she looked from every angle. I would have gotten away with it, except another tourist saw that I was in there and did the same thing and got caught. So a very angry East German female guard began screaming at him, and then at me too. I don't know if he understood any word that she said, but I didn't. And I thought the best approach would be for me to apologize in profuse English. So I was saying, I'm so sorry. We do these kinds of things in the United States. I just forgot that we're in a communist country now, and we're in Germany, and people follow the law here. And if they don't follow the law, they get sent to the gulag and things like this. And so she was screaming and I was talking. It was a very loud encounter between us, but I thought it quite fitting that I was visiting the female pharaoh when I was attacked by the female communist. It seemed synchronistic somehow. Anyway, I got to see Hatshepsut, who moved a few years later in 2007 to a department store on Friedrichstrasse, where she has abided ever since on a permanent loan basis. Eventually, however, she will be returned to the refurbished Ägyptisches Museum on Museum Island, Museum Insel, in the eastern part of Berlin, which is now a unified city. Egyptians liked the domestic cat because it was the right size to hunt the mice, but they were fond of the big cats when it came to monumental statuary. Others in the Fertile Crescent in Assyria and Babylon were mainly preoccupied by the big cats. The Assyrians kept zoological gardens in which they had captured lions and lions raised in captivity. And they were semi-domesticated, not really domesticated at all, but they were relatively tame, especially the ones who had been raised in captivity, who had been born and reared and comfortable in the vicinity of humans. And when a visiting dignitary would come to Nineveh, the king of Nineveh would have a mock lion hunt in which he would open the cage and let one of his tame lions out, and then let the visiting king spear the lion and kill the lion and feel like a big tough guy when it was actually a pet that he had killed. They didn't go out into the wild and search for the wild cats. They hunted the tame ones because it was safer. They were wusses, you might say. They were pseudo-hunters, not real hunters. Nineveh's main palace had a room decorated with scenes, tableaus from these pseudo-lion hunts, with the king of Nineveh and the visiting dignitaries spearing and shooting arrows at lions and lionesses. And one of the great works of art from the entire history of art is the death of the lioness of Nineveh, who has taken 3 arrows and whose back has been broken by the 2 of them, and is her backside is paralyzed. She's howling in pain, and it is a graphic and realistic portrayal of the hunt in progress. The Babylonians replaced the Assyrians in charge of the Middle East, and the role of a lion became more cultic and symbolic for them. The goddess Ishtar, the most important god in the Babylonian pantheon, she surpassed even the father god, was connected with the lion, and she was depicted sometimes on a chariot which was being conveyed by hitched up lions, and sometimes riding on the back of a lion. Sometimes a lion standing alone would be the symbol of Ishtar, who was on the lion's back, the way the Ark of the Covenant signified the presence of God in the temple in Jerusalem, because it was the mercy seat. God sat on the Ark of the Covenant to administer mercy to the world, and Ishtar rode on the back of a lion. They would have real lions in procession, symbolizing the presence of Ishtar, and there was a processional way leading into the city of Babylon with lions decorating on either side of the road, and also on the gate itself, along with other mythological beings. And so the lion was a very important contact with the divine for the Babylonians, which sheds a special kind of theological light on the experience of Daniel in the lion den, doesn't it? Because, in a way, Daniel was submitted to the lions for judgment and punishment. And when they spared him, it was a divine sign to the Babylonians that, yes, the God of Daniel was true God, but also that their own God had paid respects to the Hebrew God. And remember, cats hate snakes. Adam picked the wrong side. He should have gone with the cat.